Hello, and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, one of the civic partners for our show. My guest today is Karen Nadder Lago. Karen is also a League of Women Voters member, and she's an advocate for the rights of nature. She and others locally have been working to grant these rights to the St. Lawrence River. Karen, welcome to North Country Matters. Glad to have you here.
Thank you, Donna. Glad to be here.
Okay, so please tell us a little bit about yourself, Karen, and how you came to be an advocate for the rights of nature.
Well, I suppose my interest in water issues started when I first came to the St. Lawrence River. I was brought up downstate on the Hudson, but as my aunt said the first time she visited me, this was in 1972, she was like, well, this doesn't smell like a river. And it didn't. But 72 was when most of the environmental work was beginning, the Clean Water Act and other things. People were starting to have a consciousness about nature. So, but 72 was a great summer. I mean, I played tennis every day. I was out in other people's boats. I waited table, but it was a really nice time, and the river was part of all of it. And you know how some places give you energy when you're there and some places drain you? Well, this place gives me energy, and I really like being here. And so I went to grad school for my master's in journalism, and then came back to Clayton. Not a great place to be for newspaper work, especially then. But I did other things. I also worked 2 oil spills, one in 73 where I was a mucker, and then in 76 I graduated to running boats and doing bookkeeping for the cleanup company. And right after that, in the late 70s, Save the River started. And I started volunteering in the office, and I was tabbed to do trying to organize a Senate field hearing in Alexandria Bay. And it happened. Senator Moynihan came up and to hear testimony from people who were opposed to the Army Corps plan to break ice and run ships on the St. Lawrence in the winter. It was great being here, but talking to Washington and Albany and New York every day, I enjoyed the work. I loved organizing. I like politics. And I became the organization's first executive director right after the hearing. And Save the River is one of the only groups that has successfully defeated the Army Corps without a court case. I mean, we had a leg up with Abby Hoffman knowing how to organize, and his contacts got us one of the best environmental lawyers in the country. And then we made personal contacts with people in the DEC in Albany and here. And we made trips to Washington. But people like Jack Fink, who worked with the DEC and had the ear of Governor Kerry, he taught us the politics and how to work with the system. And then we had Jim Geist down at SUNY ESF, and Tom Brown here at the regional office for the DEC, who explained the science to us. And so it was a learning curve, as everything is, but it was fun, and I was hooked. I was ED for about 5 years, and have done other things. Went back to Syracuse for my MLS and was a librarian for a time. But between the investigative journalism and the library research, I've never stopped investigating water issues. And it's not a profession, but a lifelong passion.
Yeah, it's an advocacy, and of course, when you talk about being there in 1972, that was the year that really so much of our environmental consciousness became First Earth Day, start of the EPA, lots of things like that under strangely enough, the Nixon administration. And many people today would be surprised to learn how ardent environmentalists many of the Republicans were back 50 years ago. So
It was the
um,
people in his cabinet, his special that especially pushed him in that direction, and he didn't fight it. So yeah, happened
yeah,
under
yeah.
Nixon.
Lots of important things got started, including Title IX that year. So
Hmm.
clearly, a very progressive era in national government, and it's exciting to hear that for you've been an advocate now, a lifelong advocate, and the work still goes on, doesn't it? It's not over yet.
Oh no, actually, it's gotten harder,
Yeah.
and there is not that there's pushback on so many different levels. And the playbook that was used in the 60s and 70s has been picked up by people who are not as friendly to the environment, and they are running with it. And unfortunately, they are successful.
So tell us a little bit, Karen, about the rights of nature movement in general. It's actually an international movement, not something that just got started in the United States by any means, is it?
Oh no, no, it's definitely international, but it's also a grassroots movement, and it's not new. I mean, indigenous legal traditions and customs have for hundreds of years given guidance on how to live with nature as opposed to fight it. And First Nation worldviews accept nature as a living ancestor. Um, Most of the world's religions uh, have this holistic approach. Pope Francis has been extremely vocal about how humans' relationship to nature should change. And in one of his encyclicals, he said that we need to change our actions because a true right of the environment does exist. And that seems to trickle down a little bit, but it's not an easy fight. And most of the problem comes because of the outlook we have here in the United States. Um, Earth's ecosystems are complex living communities to which human beings belong. But most policies meant to protect the environment see humans as somehow separate, superior, and insulated from it. And so, from that perspective, the human-centric approach, it allows more harm than it prevents. There are environmental laws, of course, but they specifically say you can't do this. And everything outside of this is allowable. And what's outside causes much more harm than it should. And so it's where we need to change the perspective. There has to be a paradigm shift. And that's what Rights of Nature is trying to do. We have rights to thrive and exist, and that is given to us as persons under the law. Corporations have, as judicial persons, have these rights. So why not nature? And that's, we're trying to redress this imbalance is what Rights of Nature is trying to do.
You make a good point about the fact that the courts recognize corporations as quote unquote people too, and of
Mhm.
course they're not people in the same sense that people are people.
No, they
In
can't die.
Yeah, apparently
Rarely
not.
do they die. Yeah.
So in 2008, Ecuador recognized the rights of nature in its constitution, and that was the first country to do so. So this is a movement that is beginning to really grow. We're seeing rivers are getting rights in certain locations.
Mhm.
Countries are starting to think about this in a different way. So this is the start really of a very important movement, and particularly as we're going through the kinds of climate change that we are seeing every day, not only in our backyards but around the world. We really need to understand that we live in nature and we live with nature. We're not in charge of nature. And nature's making that pretty clear these days, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's like, yeah.
So,
it
Karen, the St. Lawrence is such a critical watershed for the continent. It drains as it does the entire Great Lakes system. Tell us why the St. Lawrence is the focus of your efforts, other than just the fact that you live here. But who else is involved in this campaign?
in 2022, there was a symposium in Canton. And while I knew of rights of nature and have always been involved in it, it used to be called wild law. But it's been around since 72 in the modern sense, because of a essay written called Should Trees Have Standing? And so this has been kicking around for a while, but it's such a drastic shift in how we approach nature for most Americans that it hasn't gotten much play. But the symposium in Canton that I attended was well attended by people in the area, and they succeeded in having the rights of nature resolution passed in Potsdam, November of that year, and that protects the Racket River within the town of Potsdam's borders. But then things didn't happen, and I always wanted them to approach it from a different point of view. I wanted them to go big. I mean, there's an organization called the Waterkeeper Alliance that has river keeper, lake keepers all over the world. And so if we tapped into them and just pushed it that way, maybe, but they didn't, they wanted the legal people involved who are, I always forget what it stands for. It's a community legal defense, environmental legal defense fund, and they're involved in many of the resolutions that have been passed across the country. They wanted to start small, so they did start small with Potsdam, but then I don't know if anything else came of it. So I wanted to do something on the river, and organizing here is not as easy as it was. Getting people to attend their town board meetings is not an easy ask. It's like, I don't know. And town board meetings aren't what they used to be. It used to be a gathering place where everybody would show up, but people don't show up. They're more legal formalities now. Most towns, some towns still have vibrant conversations and discussions, but so we have 6 people in the 6 river towns from where the river comes out of the lake to Ogdensburg. And the month of March was decided would be a good time. And so the first meeting was in Morristown, and then Hammond canceled their meeting for some reason this month. But then I had met with the Clayton Town Board last Wednesday, and we're moving through the list. On last Thursday, the town of Orleans passed at the meeting, unanimously passed the resolution. Their town attorney was present, and he agreed that it was a good, and they liked it more than just protecting the St. Lawrence. They wanted to protect the inland areas. And Pat Sullivan, who was the person who presented in Orleans, is a teacher at Lafargeville, and his students were all jazzed about this. And as most kids are, because the future is not bright for them, environmentally speaking. And so they were, and Pat mentioned this in his remarks to the board. And the supervisor at Orleans, Kevin Rarick, his dad was a math teacher. So everything resonated with everybody there. And it was, I guess from what Pat said, a very positive feeling. So I'm hoping when the attorneys of the other towns get a chance to look at the resolution, and they will pass it too.
Karen, you make a good point about talking about it doesn't seem that people are as involved in their town and village governments as they used to be. And I had a conversation just last week with Bill Shumway, who's the editor and publisher of North Country This Week, and he's talked about how the collapse of local journalism has really affected how people relate to government because they don't know as much about how their local government works. They may not even know who their local council and town council members are. And it's harder to be an advocate when you're kind of in that information black hole that so many people find themselves in. So
Mhm.
the fact that these young people in this school district in the town of Orleans got excited about this and came out, it's an excellent lesson in them for them in how local government works and how to be effective as a local advocate, isn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, and Pat is a social studies teacher. His students didn't come to the meeting though, but
Okay.
they expressed their excitement to him, and then he relayed it to the town board.
Mhm.
And I think maybe in the future, Pat will have them attend more of the town board
Well,
meetings.
I think that's a lesson that every young person that would be a great assignment. If you're in a government class, go
Mhm,
sit through a town meeting or a village meeting or even a county board meeting, because
mhm.
it gives you a really interesting perspective on how decisions are made and who the deciders are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Civics, it's in a sad state right now.
Well,
Nobody.
hopefully this is the kind of thing, especially if, and we know from studies all over the place that uh, the environment and climate and nature is something that young people take very seriously for the reason that you articulated, which is they're worried about what the world they're going to inherit looks like. So these are
Mhm.
great causes for them to start to get involved with. So you're lobbying these 6 town governments and hope to get the other 5 to go ahead and adopt this resolution. Where does the movement go from here?
Well, it's one foot in front of the other, you know. It's not headline grabbing stuff, but it is do the due diligence, and it's mostly an education campaign. I think when people understand what's at stake, they will do the right thing, I think, most of the time. Um, and that's what this is, sort of a soft approach. We're trying to win the hearts and minds. It's it it's such a drastic shift in so many ways that you have to get people to buy in at the grassroots level. And so that's what we're trying to do. Um, any of the major changes in attitude came slowly, um, and they still haven't been successful. I mean, there's the rights to liberate slaves and women from being property that took a long time, and it's still not fully realized. So I'm not expecting this to be a quick success story. I think it's going to take time, and so the more people, we could bring on board at the local level and build enthusiasm up, maybe we can, grow it to a state level, and lots of things have become successful nationally by starting locally, and so.
That's very true. A lot of state models have proven the effectiveness of campaigns and of laws and of things like this, so that you get enough local examples that work, and then they start to pay attention at a higher level. That's a
Well,
good point.
just such major gay marriage was, oh my gosh, no. But the campaign was state by state, and then it just went national and was successful. But it was successful nationally because of the hard work people did in each state.
Yeah, it is, you say, it takes a long time to change cultural attitudes. It takes a long time to educate people.
Mhm.
And the rights of nature is something that's been around for a while and is really only now starting to get some press and starting to get some wider acceptance. So your work is very important in that area. You mentioned about the town of Potsdam saying that the Racket River, through its borders, should be granted these rights. I think one of the things that we need to remind folks of is that everybody, for the most part, lives downriver from
Mhm.
somewhere else. And
Mhm.
so the decisions that are made upriver are going to affect your water quality. They're going to affect your quality of life. They're going to affect all kinds of things. We certainly have seen that in places like Messina, where the river for many years was used as a sewer
Mhm.
for heavy industry, and it's still being cleaned up today. You mentioned growing up in the Hudson. Hudson's a perfect example that it's coming back, but it's been a long, hard slog, hasn't it, to return that river to actually being a river that fish can live in and people can enjoy.
Well, yeah, it was treated as a, a sewer, and it was the impact of one person. It was Pete Seeger who really kickstarted that whole thing in the 70s, and he lived on the Hudson, and he smell and the you know, well, what was the Cuyahoga River in Ohio that was going into flames because of
That's
the oil
right.
and debris. So it was a bad time, and of course he had connections, but he went. It was a small start, and he always told people that the Hudson belongs to you. It is the people's property. And he was right. And the responsibility then falls on each of us to make sure that what belongs to us
And
isn't harmed.
Pete Seeger's a great example of how one person who took up a cause really made a difference. And that is true of all of us. We can all make a difference. So tell people, Karen, how they can get involved in this campaign for the St. Lawrence. Where can their efforts be the most useful?
I think right now, primarily, if they educate themselves, and there are lots of websites they can go to. The Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature is sort of a clearinghouse online for things, but then the law firms that have been helping localities pass resolutions, the Earth Law Center and that Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, their websites are also good to take a look at. No sense reinventing the wheel. It's all out there. You can copy, paste, and edit and make your own resolutions and your own talking points to give to people in your community. You could talk at civic meetings. I mean, the Rotary's always interested in having people come talk. Go to your town board meetings and listen for a couple meetings if you haven't been, and then get to know your town board representatives, and then try to make a pitch. There is, I understand, a local organization that the two people who organized that symposium in 2022, they have an organization locally called Talking Rivers, and they have a website. Those two people are excellent at creating websites. They're artists, and the websites are worth looking at just to see what a really eye-catching website looks like. But they may have ideas what you can do locally too. So there's a lot of opportunities um, to educate yourself, and then of course educate your friends and neighbors.
Another group that could have a big impact on this is the St. Lawrence County Board of Legislators, because if the county adopted a resolution like this, that would be very impactful since the river runs right past the northern border of the county. Is
Mhm.
any of this work also being done on the Canadian side?
Well, yes, there are at least 7 tribal nations in the United States and Canada that have adopted rights of nature resolutions. Um, over, I know there's over 60 cities and counties throughout the US that have done this. And then aside from Ecuador, 25 countries.
Mhm.
So it's spreading. They've protected anything from salmon to crops of rice, um, to valleys, to rivers, to mountaintops. So it's wide open. I mean, I'm sure people have their favorite spots. And if they're public areas or should be public areas, then this is something you need to look into. What they call the commons everything that belongs to the people, has been co-opted by the same groups when you had that show about the news desert.
Mhm.
It's the same hedge funds, it's the same multinational corporations, it's the same vulture capitalists that are trying to turn the tables and have a small handful of people own and control everything when the rest of us just sort of have no voice. But we do have a voice, and it may seem sometimes that we don't, but we do, and maybe we need to speak a little louder. We don't have to be rude, and we still have to listen, but I think we can't let them ride roughshod over us or the natural world.
You make a great point there, and this is the opportunity for people to listen and to decide what it is that they can do themselves and not to feel like they are powerless, because none of us are powerless. We all have voices, and particularly when we come together and we use those voices in concert, we can affect real change. So I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I hope other people will listen to the message and this will be something that they care about. It is something that we should care about for our kids and our grandkids and our great grandkids, because they're the ones who are going to inherit the mess we leave. And
Mhm.
so we should be cleaning up our messes as much as we can and trying to reverse all of these negative impacts that have been happened over the years because people didn't think about the rights of nature, and they didn't think about how there would be long-term consequences for the decisions that they're making today. So, Karen, thank you for your work. Thank you for your voice, and thank you for continuing to educate us and other people about these really important issues.
Well, thank you for helping to spread the word, Donna.
Well, that's what we do here at North Country Matters.
You do.
So, these conversations are a production of North Country Matters. This show is a civic collaboration between the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County and the Potsdam Public Library. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters.